A new trace. The morning sun cast long shadows across the operations room at the Australian Transport Safety Bureau. Sarah Chen stood before a wall of maps, her coffee growing cold in her hand. It had been 7 years since Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 vanished from the sky, and she had spent nearly every day of those years searching for answers. Outside the window, the city of Canberra was just beginning to wake. Sarah watched the early commuters making their way along the streets below, each one certain of their destination. She envied them that certainty. Her own destination had remained frustratingly out of reach for so long. "You're here early again," came a voice from the doorway. Sarah turned to see Marcus Webb, her colleague and closest friend on the investigation team. He carried 2 fresh cups of coffee, steam rising from them in the cool morning air. "Couldn't sleep," Sarah admitted, accepting the cup he offered. "I keep thinking about the families." 7 years, Marcus. 7 years of not knowing. Marcus moved to stand beside her at the window. He understood. They both did. This wasn't just about finding an aircraft anymore. It was about bringing closure to 239 families who had been left in limbo, suspended between grief and hope. The investigation had become their shared obsession. Sarah had joined the team 3 months after the disappearance, a young analyst fresh from university. Marcus had been there from the beginning, one of the first responders when the plane failed to arrive in Beijing on that March morning in 2014. "Tell me again," Sarah said softly. "Tell me about that first day." Marcus settled into a chair, his hands wrapped around his coffee. He had told this story many times, but Sarah needed to hear it. She needed to remember why they kept searching. "It was chaos," Marcus began, his voice quiet and measured. The plane had taken off from Kuala Lumpur just after midnight. Everything seemed normal. The pilots signed off with air traffic control, routine and calm. And then, somewhere over the South China Sea, the transponder stopped transmitting. Sarah closed her eyes, picturing the scene. The darkened cockpit. The sleeping passengers. The vast ocean below. "At first, we thought it was a technical failure," Marcus continued. "Maybe a catastrophic event, sudden and quick. But then the military radar data came in. The plane had turned back. It had flown across Malaysia, turned northwest, and then, nothing. It just vanished. They had searched for years. Ships had crisscrossed the Indian Ocean, underwater vehicles had scanned vast stretches of the seabed. They had found debris, pieces of the aircraft that had washed up on distant shores. A flaperon on Réunion Island. Fragments in Mozambique and Madagascar. Each piece confirmed that the plane had crashed somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean, but the main wreckage remained hidden beneath the waves. Sarah moved to her desk and opened her laptop. The screen glowed in the dim light, displaying the latest satellite data. This was her specialty, analyzing the automated messages that the aircraft had continued to send even after the transponder stopped working. These messages, called handshakes, had painted an arc across the ocean, a possible flight path that had guided their search. "There's something I want to show you," Sarah said, her fingers moving across the keyboard. "I've been running new simulations overnight. Different wind patterns, different fuel calculations." Marcus joined her, leaning over her shoulder to study the screen. Lines of data scrolled past, numbers and coordinates that would mean nothing to most people but everything to them. "We've been assuming the plane flew on autopilot," Sarah explained. "A ghost flight, with everyone unconscious from lack of oxygen. But what if someone was flying it? What if those final maneuvers were deliberate?" She pulled up a map, showing the search area they had covered over the years. It was enormous, thousands of square kilometers of empty ocean. And yet they had found nothing. "Look here," Sarah pointed to a spot on the map, north of where they had concentrated their efforts. If someone was controlling the plane, avoiding radar detection, trying to disappear, this is where they would go. Marcus studied the map in silence. Sarah could see the wheels turning in his mind, weighing possibilities against probabilities. "You think we've been searching in the wrong place," he said finally. "I think we've been asking the wrong questions," Sarah replied. "We've been trying to find where the plane crashed. Maybe we should be asking why it crashed there." The day passed slowly. Sarah and Marcus worked through the new data, building models and testing theories. Other team members came and went, each one carrying their own piece of the puzzle. There was Elena Rodriguez, the oceanographer who understood the currents that could carry debris thousands of miles. There was David Park, the aviation engineer who could read a piece of twisted metal like others read books. And there was their director, James Morrison, who had carried the weight of this investigation with quiet dignity for 7 long years. As evening approached, James called them all together. The conference room was small and cramped, filled with boxes of files and rolled-up charts. They gathered around the table, tired but determined. "I had a call today," James began, his voice heavy. "From a survey company that's been mapping the ocean floor for environmental studies. They've found something. An anomaly on the seabed, in an area we haven't searched." The room fell silent. Sarah felt her heart begin to race. "Where?" Marcus asked. James unrolled a chart across the table. "Here," he said, pointing to a location north of their previous search area. "Right where your new analysis suggested, Sarah." For a moment, no one spoke. 7 years of searching, of hoping and failing and trying again. And now, perhaps, a new beginning. "We need to be careful," Elena said softly. "We've had false leads before. Underwater mountains that looked like wreckage. Shipping containers that gave us hope and then took it away." "I know," James nodded. "But we have to look. We owe it to the families to look." The next weeks were a blur of planning and preparation. A ship was equipped, underwater vehicles were prepared, and the team made ready to venture back into the Indian Ocean. Sarah worked 18-hour days, refining her analysis, making sure they were looking in the right place. She thought often about the families. She had met some of them over the years, at memorial services and anniversary gatherings. She remembered a woman from China whose daughter had been on the flight, traveling to a new job in Beijing. The woman's eyes had been hollow with loss, but she had thanked Sarah for not giving up, for continuing to search. "We just want to know," the woman had said. "We just want to bring them home." The ship departed on a gray morning, setting course for the search area. Sarah and Marcus were on board, along with Elena and a crew of specialists. The journey took days, the ship cutting through the swells as they moved further from land. Standing on the deck at night, Sarah looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, satellites continued their silent watch over the Earth. And somewhere below, in the darkness of the ocean, the truth was waiting. The underwater search began in careful, methodical sweeps. The submersible vehicles moved slowly across the seabed, their sonar painting pictures of a world no human eyes could see. Mountains and valleys, plains of sediment stretching to the horizon. And then, on the 4th day, they found it. The sonar image appeared on the screen, unmistakable and heartbreaking. The distinctive shape of an aircraft fuselage, lying on the ocean floor 3,000 meters below the surface. Around it, scattered across the sediment, were the broken pieces of what had once been a Boeing 777. Sarah stood frozen, unable to speak. Marcus reached out and took her hand. Around them, the crew worked with quiet efficiency, recording coordinates and capturing images. But for Sarah, time seemed to stop. They had found MH370. The recovery operation took months. Each piece of wreckage was carefully documented and raised to the surface. The black boxes were found, damaged but intact enough to retrieve data. And slowly, painfully, the story of that terrible night began to emerge. The investigation that followed brought no comfort, only understanding. The plane had been deliberately crashed, the result of actions no one could have prevented or predicted. But now, at least, there were answers. Now, the families could begin to grieve properly, knowing the truth. Sarah stood once more in the operations room in Canberra. A year had passed since they had found the wreckage. The maps on the wall had been taken down, replaced by photographs of the recovery operation. The investigation was closing, the reports being filed away. Marcus joined her, as he had so many mornings before. "It's strange," Sarah said quietly. "We spent all those years searching, and now that it's done, I don't know what to do with myself." "We gave them closure," Marcus replied. 239 families can finally say goodbye. That matters, Sarah. That matters more than anything. Sarah nodded, tears forming in her eyes. She thought of the Chinese woman whose daughter had been on the flight. They had spoken again, after the discovery. The woman's eyes were still sad, but the terrible uncertainty was gone. "Thank you for not forgetting her," the woman had said. Thank you for bringing her home. The sun was rising over Canberra, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 7 years begin to lift from her shoulders. The search was over. The questions were answered. And somewhere, 239 souls could finally rest in peace. Come on, Marcus said gently. Let's go home. And together, they walked out into the new day, leaving the maps and the memories behind, carrying with them the knowledge that they had never given up, never stopped searching, never stopped caring. Sometimes, Sarah knew, the most important thing we can do is keep looking, keep hoping, keep believing that the truth is out there waiting to be found. And sometimes, if we're patient enough and brave enough, we find it. The end.